I'm here with Christiana Riley, the CEO of Deutsche Bank in the Americas, where there are about 8,000 employees that she oversees. Let's mark this moment because it's the first interview you're doing in a brand new building, the Deutsche Bank Center. It used to be the Time Warner Center after a long tenure on Wall Street. How quickly, though, can you bring people back here given we are still grappling with COVID?
So, Sonali, it's a pleasure to welcome you here to Deutsche Bank Center. We're absolutely thrilled to be opening this building at such an important time for New York City. It's 20 years ago, in the aftermath of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, that Deutsche Bank made the important decision as the first foreign firm to list on the New York Stock Exchange in those immediate weeks after that. And this moment for us up here at Columbus Circle is just as seminal, just as pivotal, because we feel that we're also excited to be part of this return back to the city. We'll be bringing close to 5,000 people back to this office over the course of the next 6 months, and we're absolutely thrilled to be part of that resurgence.
You have such an interesting strategy because while some banks are bringing people back in thousands now or in the coming weeks, we've heard that Deutsche Bank still has people coming in 2022, that there's some time for them to come back in.
Yeah, so this whole experience of the last year and a half has been a real leadership challenge, certainly for me, but I know for many in our industry. And we've really needed to think about how do we balance the safety and well-being of our staff with the performance and success of our firms. And we've reflected a lot on that over the last year and a half, always having kind of a principles-based return. That began, of course, in March of 2020 with needing to get, the information that we had at our fingertips back then was get people into their homes and get them safe. As we've navigated through this, science has helped us to know testing helps getting people back in the office. Ultimately, vaccination has been the real key. And so we've communicated really openly with staff throughout this, and are thrilled to now have the confidence with vaccines in place to be bringing people back in person. But as much as we believe, and we very strongly believe in the value of collaboration, you'll see so many examples of collaborative spaces around this beautiful new building. We also understand we've learned a ton about flexible working arrangements, right? And the value that that can have in making sure that we continue to be an attractive employer in this industry.
Well, speaking of flexibility, there are so many people that are bringing people back very quickly, as we had discussed. Do you think Wall Street risks the talent it has if it moves too fast?
So I think we need to clearly differentiate between what we call the return to office versus reimagining the future of work. And those two may not operate on the same timeline and may not in different pockets of the organization operate on the same timeline. As you say, we're bringing people back over the next 6 months, and we're working through the articulation of that future vision. We've got nearly 80% of our staff coming back to this building with the option to have up to 40% flexible working arrangements. And that's a phenomenal opportunity, I think, to re-envision the way we collaborate one another and what does office space really mean.
So there's also the idea that you've inherited this bank that in the US that is a lot leaner, right, than the one that you inherited when you had stepped in just a couple of years ago. So when we look at Deutsche Bank's presence in the Americas today from a business perspective, what can we expect it to be in the next year or so? Where can we expect it to grow?
So when we met 2 years ago for the first time, Sonali, I told you that my mission was to make Deutsche Bank in the Americas smaller, tough message, simpler, but in doing those two things to ultimately make us stronger. And we're talking now 2 years later, and we're really well advanced on that mission. We've stabilized the platform. We've made difficult decisions around shedding businesses that weren't successful, weren't profitable for us in this market, and we've set the firm on much more solid footing by concentrating on the businesses that are our signature strengths. We've got a spectrum of businesses across the fixed income and credit origination space that are really genuinely of value for our clients, where we're bringing real value in terms of financing growth opportunities in this very dynamic market here in the US, and we're very proud of those businesses. We see continued growth there, particularly as the firm's financial condition recuperates group-wide. We've been very validated by what the upgrades that we've now received from Moody's just last week, from Fitch, and we're seeing a genuine resurgence in client engagement on the back of that gives us a lot of confidence in the growth for the future.
So as of last indication with investors, you had said that revenue in the area would be stable. Do you think it can now grow?
So we have, by the way, achieved that mission of certainly stabilizing businesses. I've talked about, and we absolutely have confidence in our ability to grow in this market. I've talked about the strength of our credit businesses. Within that, one of the very exciting dynamics that we're seeing is the growth of our sustainability-linked business. Deutsche Bank's market share in ESG debt issuance has more than doubled since I arrived here in 2019 in a market that we predict will top $3 trillion later this year. There are enormous opportunities for us bringing some of the expertise that arguably is a little bit more advanced in our European home market to clients here in the US who are going to be faced with those same challenges of navigating their way through and financing their way through the response to climate change.
So the financing business is in the investment bank, and we're watching a lot of global peers, namely Credit Suisse, really shrink their presence in terms of talent and otherwise in the US. Do you see an opportunity to gain share as a European bank in the US?
We see opportunities to make investments here in this market for sure, and we have been doing that selectively throughout the last 2 years, even as we have been transforming and repositioning the business. So there are absolutely those opportunities for us here.
So a lot of your job is also regulatory. What can you tell investors about how quickly you can get past some remaining regulatory issues that stands for Deutsche Bank in the US?
So we continue to have constructive and productive dialogue. The most important thing in that dialogue is being able to demonstrate that we have the right risk management mentality at Deutsche Bank in the Americas, that we understand the risk profile, the risks we take. We are a bank, taking risk is our business, but that we also have the appropriate controls relative to those risks. That's not just understood by our risk managers, but that's understood by our traders, by our credit issuers throughout the stack of our business. And as we work toward that goal, we are very confident that we continue to recuperate and develop those strong relationships with our supervisors.
Is there a day that we can see soon that Deutsche Bank grows again by means of acquisitions in the United States?
So as I said, my mission here has been to stabilize the platform, prepare us for growth. As we look at the market here in the US and certainly where valuation levels have moved, I think the more attractive opportunities for us are creating those growth opportunities organically. We don't have an acquisition-based strategy here. Hiring is a big part of that, right? Hiring and being able to take advantage, as I say, of the strong recovery of our financial position as being reflected by the ratings upgrades and our ability to just have a broader dialogue with our clients on the back of that.
It's interesting to hear you say hiring as well after so many years of job cuts that we've seen of Deutsche Bank in the US. When you say hiring in the US, how expansive can those plans get in the coming year or so?
So one of the exciting things that has happened as we've experienced this recovery, and it's been hard fought, right? We've really been working in a disciplined way quarter for quarter to convince the market that we are on a credible track to improvement. But you see the rewards of that, for example, in just how much easier it is for us to attract talent to the platform. We've had a 39% uptick in the number of unprompted applications to our platform. We know there's a significant labor market rotation going on at the moment, but even beyond that, I think that statistic is really powerful in emphasizing the recovery in our attractiveness as an employer in this region.
Are you feeling that same war on talent that you're hearing some of your peers in the US speak to?
Sure, we absolutely are. I think about it in terms of, as I say, a rotation in this market. We know that there's been some pent-up demand, a pent-up lack of mobility across the industry, and there's certainly that dynamic is affecting all of us. But I'm encouraged by how our platform is responding to that and the level of interest that we're getting.
Now, as somebody who does have a strong arm into Washington, given that you work so closely with regulators, multiple vacancies we're seeing at the Federal Reserve, big turnover, big changes under the Biden administration under who is now overseeing the financial system. What do all these changes mean for Wall Street at the end of the day?
So I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about the vacancies. And I think, what I would say to partners down in Washington is we really need to speed this process of confirmations along, because the longer we sit with these vacancies, the less productive and the less long-term oriented the dialogue can be. And I think Wall Street is really looking to Washington to move swiftly so that we can all have some better dialogue and more clarity on that long-term direction.
Is there any uncertainty that's being created now because of those vacancies in these really critical positions that is concerning your clients or you?
I think it's fair to say, wherever there's a lack of clarity, there is going to be some questioning. I wouldn't overstate it, but certainly we are looking ahead to how those vacancies resolve themselves so that we can begin to reignite that constructive dialogue.
There's also a lot of uncertainty abroad. When it comes to China, when we're seeing a lot of these crackdowns, is there anything that's concerning your clients in the way they invest and allocate capital?
So, we have a very globally interconnected business model. And we are a European-rooted firm looking at dynamics in the U.S. and looking at dynamics between the U.S. and China with that lens. We've just come off the back of German elections this past weekend, which of course will shape not just how Germany is looking at those dynamics between U.S. and China, but also how Europe positions itself. We know that Germany is at the heart of the European leadership development. So it's hard for us to look at that, and for me to look at that from a purely U.S. lens. We look at it in an interconnected way, the same way that our globally interconnected clients do.
There's China, there's changes at the Fed in the U.S., there's interest rates themselves that's making markets very jittery. What are your clients most concerned about, and do they share the same concerns that we're seeing in the stock market today in large?
For sure. Our institutional client base is very much monitoring decisions at the Fed, dynamics at the European Central Bank as well, that will clearly drive markets over the next couple of months. The speed of tapering, how that ultimately affects interest rate policy, are certainly driving conversations on the fixed income side of things. So we're all looking very closely. Certainly wish we had that crystal ball, which we know we do not.
On the fixed income side of things, lastly, do you think that investors are starting to get in over their skis in terms of leverage they're taking on from corporations or even funds themselves? I mean, we've seen one massive blow up this year alone with Archegos.
Difficult to predict. As I say, I think we're headed into somewhat choppy or less predictable market conditions as we see support from central banks pulling back, and we all want to be vigilant of the risks that are going to emerge as a consequence of that.
Now, lastly, you are one of the most senior women in finance in the United States. When you look at the progress on diversity and inclusion that we've seen over the last year on Wall Street, how do you feel about the pace of change that we're seeing?
So first of all, I do look forward to the day, as I know many other women leaders in this industry do, where we no longer end an interview talking about these questions, but it is important from where we are today, and I certainly acknowledge that. We've been making progress here within our own organization. We put out a new set of commitments as part of our sustainability set of KPIs. We know that running a diverse and inclusive organization is key to sustainable performance in the longer term. We look at that in this market in terms of gender representation overall, but also at our leadership levels, which is critically important to again, drive that sustainable development through the organization. Equally, we've been looking with renewed intensity at racial representation, both across the organization, but also at the leadership level. And I think the way in which we promote the return to the office is also a very important part of that dialogue. Giving employees the confidence that we are returning to a better organization, a more inclusive organization, an organization that better reflects the flexibility that's going to keep us all succeeding in the workforce is a huge opportunity to promote those goals.
Back to this office. Are you bullish on New York, given so many are moving away? I know you've moved up here for your clients. Similarly, we're seeing so many people move to Texas and Florida and places with lower taxes and more sunshine. Do you feel that the center of commerce will still be in this city?
So I think the demise of New York is vastly overstated. We are experiencing a resurgence of this city, and I think New York represents, particularly for the financial services industry, an ecosystem that cannot be easily replicated. I think also, particularly focused on the financial services industry, the value of being able to bring our younger colleagues back into the office and promote the apprenticeship that we've all benefited from in our journeys through this industry is so critically important. Being in the office matters. Balancing that with flexibility is a great opportunity. That said, you rightly point out, we do have clients who are migrating to different parts of this country, and there's absolutely an opportunity for us to reevaluate, look at dispersion models over time. But for now, we're really thrilled to see this ecosystem in New York coming back to life.